In the 16th century, a renegade Dominican monk rewired the boundaries of human thought. He fused memory with cosmology, poetry with philosophy, and dared to claim the universe was infinite. And for this, the church repaid him by burning him alive at the stake. Not because he was mistaken, but because he was centuries ahead. This is Dr. Anthony Metivier from magneticmerrymethod.com, and today we're exploring the polymathic mind of Giordano Bruno, one of history's oldest and most dangerous polymaths. And this quick rundown is my way of celebrating the newly released edition of Frances Yates' Giordano Bruno and the Hermetic Tradition from Gallow Glass Books. This is a cornerstone text that changed how we understand the Renaissance, memory, and the cosmos. And if you want to learn how to think across multiple disciplines, remember vast amounts of knowledge, and challenge every dogma in your path, this book is your map, or at least it's a corner of it. And, in full disclosure, this publishing house that's just doing amazing things, they offered to pay me to make a video about this book after sending me a copy. But I said no. I would love to do it. I did get the copy for free. That's fine. But I said, just lend me some patience. And you couldn't even pay me enough to do it anyway, because I can't hurry up. I'm building a physical memory palace, after all, a project hugely inspired by Bruno. And even if I have my beef with some of the ways that Frances Yates describes Bruno in this book, listen, this is a tremendous book, and we're lucky to have it for some of the reasons that I'll mention as I talk through Bruno's polymathic skill set. But let's get something straight, and this is really, really important. Yates is worth reading because this book is about a lot of polymaths, actually. And these are people you should be studying, because a polymath isn't just someone who dabbles like we see a lot of people dabbling in our time and then calling themselves polymathic. They might be multipotentialites, but a true polymath can synthesize knowledge across domains and create something entirely new. And that's what Giordano Bruno did. And new, needs some qualification. But let's just take it at face value for now. It's the case that polymaths are people who go further than just knowing a lot of things. They're weavers. And the act of weaving, the depth with which Bruno brought that skill of weaving things together, disparate fields, brought together to create a new way of thinking. Astronomy with theology, poetry with politics, memory with metaphysics. That's what made Bruno dangerous. So before we even talk about stars and atoms, you need to understand that Bruno's superpower was memory. Not just memorizing facts, but reprogramming thought itself using ancient memory techniques from Aristotle, from Simonides of Chios, Peter of Ravenna, Ramon Lull. I've covered all of these fine folks in my work. So if you want the robots to recommend more deep dives into them and get oodles of fascinating books recommended to you, get subscribed if you're new here. And for the love of memory, hit that thumbs up so that all ships rise as new people also learn to master their memory. Now, when it comes to memory, one thing that makes Bruno so special is that he not only used memory techniques like the memory palace, he revised the ways that many, many people use it. He fused memory palaces with interesting, esoteric imagery, things from mythology, cosmology, and a radically new take on how to use the mental architecture that people around Europe at that time were not fully practicing. And he helped a lot of people leave rote repetition behind. But Bruno also talked about his sources. So he talked about how much he admired Aristotle's memory techniques. He talked about Peter of Ravenna. And although I've never found him mention Jacobus Publicius, I'm sure that he got a lot of his ideas from Publicius too. But the really wild part is that Bruno didn't just use the memory techniques, and he did. He used them for facts. He used them for language learning. But he used them to expand the space of his working memory to help him theorize an entire vision of the universe. And what was that theory? Well, part of it was that the universe is a cosmic memory system unto itself. And you might think, oh my goodness, that sounds really weird. But just as of a month ago, Florian Neukart in New Scientist posted his theory that space-time is built from memory itself. And I'm going to talk with Florian on the podcast later today. I'm going to record it. So if you don't want to miss that episode, make sure to be subscribed. But at the end of the day, that idea, it may well be shown out, and it may be the case that Bruno was right, that there's something related between the nature of reality and our human memory, our experience of memory. And so, although that hasn't been proven, the idea of infinity that Bruno insisted upon, well, it's been well evidenced that there's something like that going on long before telescopes helped people prove just how far into time and space matter goes. Bruno envisioned an infinite universe with infinite stars, infinite worlds, all inhabited, and perhaps as a consequence of that, infinite gods. And so the infinite universe has no center for Bruno. It has no edge. It is building itself out of itself. And we find ourselves in this living cosmos, teeming with the same intelligence that is engaging in this process. So this isn't astronomy, and it's not cosmic pluralism. There's actually no name for what Bruno was up to. And if you want my not so humble but always magnetic opinion, that's a good thing, and that's what he's trying to get us to understand. It can't be named because to try to name it is to draw upon the thing that you're trying to name, right? And he says this, if I can remember my Latin, very clearly in 30 Statues. Abit ergo chaos, non statuem non figurem. So he's basically saying there's no statue to represent what it is we're trying to talk about. There's no figure. And it is, in fact, the impossibility of naming what Bruno was gesturing at that got him labeled a heretic. Like, he literally was asked to confirm the personhood of Christ. He said, dude, I don't even believe in the idea of the person. And the Inquisition took 2 weeks off to discuss this because, boy, oh boy, that Bruno guy, he might just be right. So he was a proto-information scientist, a philosopher of language and meaning, a semiotician. He wrote poetic treatises, dialogues, and fiery manifestos that used language to deconstruct the language wielded by those who tried to create an imbalance of power over others, also known as the church. And to combat this sick power imbalance that he thought was so against nature, and yet at the same time he recognized as just being part of the way things are. Well, that's my take on Bruno. There was a sort of play with it, like a Zen master. But Yates thinks that what Bruno was up to, and you can read all about this in Giordano Bruno and the Hermetic Tradition, she thinks he was blending all this out of Neoplatonism, Hermeticism, and Stoicism, and filtering it all through a razor-sharp penchant for critique, and specifically for critiquing those who use church dogma to control the behaviors of other people. Well, Yates definitely put a lot of elbow grease into making the argument that Bruno was essentially a dualist. And one cool thing about this book is that it's been updated with color illustrations and paintings and so forth that try to supplement what Yates was saying. And it's a good resource if you are into these philosophical ideas and you want to know more about the history of the era and have a much better book than the old ones with black and white pictures. And this one has pictures that aren't even in the old editions. So it's a tremendous resource in that way. And, you know, I just don't buy Yates' argument. I think myself that Bruno was obsessed with memory as a foundation that demonstrates not a duality between ourselves and some force that makes things, but that memory is oneness. Memory itself proves that we belong to a single, unified source of being, and it is building us out of itself, and we are part of the building process, building it out of itself because there's no division between us. And I think that one reason why Yates might miss this step is because she admits herself that she never used the memory techniques that Bruno crafted. But not only that, I think she misses a step with the memory wheels that Bruno used, because Bruno wasn't just about memory and memory wheels and memory palaces, but also critical thinking processes. And he wanted to help people use these critical thinking processes so they could experience not the same thoughts that he was having, but the experience of having those kinds of thoughts that would theoretically make you feel like you were part of the cosmos as a kind of memory. And that outcome, this idea that you are the same as the thing that you're trying to refer to, but you can't refer to it because you're built out of the thing that you're trying to explain, they tried to erase him for that. Erase him and his ideas in fire. But ideas like Bruno's, they don't burn. They spread. And as a result, to this day we're talking about Bruno. And he influenced philosophers like Leibniz, Nietzsche, and myself. Not that I'm a philosopher as such. I mean, maybe a philosopher of memory. But Bruno's cosmology laid the groundwork for scientific revolutions. He inspired many, many future astronomers. And his polymathic courage, it echoes today. And he was able to do that because he was able to study the other astronomers. He was able to understand the math, but he was also able to understand multiple languages that allowed him to talk with multiple people in multiple countries as he traveled Europe. So every time that you challenge orthodoxy or dare to think across disciplines, whether you want to train your memory, sharpen your intellect, or walk any part of the polymath's path, when you're doing that, Bruno's in there, in that mix. He's that important. And his story is both a warning and a roadmap. So this book by Yates will introduce you to an entire cast of characters, not just Bruno. People whose thinking, their ability to implement, and their absolute passion for truth as they experienced it will inspire you, and it will inform your own learning. Now, as far as I know, there are only a few copies of this Gallow Glass edition left, and the amazing full color treatment is something you're going to enjoy for the rest of your life. So if you want one, giddy up. Now, how about you? If you're the commenting type, tell me in the comments. What's your Bruno level ambition? And what discipline will you master next to help you get there? And how will memory techniques be part of it? How will philosophy be part of it? Subscribe, and if you want to, keep the memory revolution burning. Watch my video on the physical memory palace I'm building next. In addition to a bit more info about this special edition of Yates' book on Bruno, I'm going to introduce you in that video to a very, very special mnemonic method that involves pillars, and I guarantee you don't want to miss it. Thanks as always, and until we have a chance to speak again, keep yourself magnetic. I don't know how it's going to work to have space, but just an open window here.